You're going to want to do acts of service because I just love my wife so much because I know her. The only way I really get to know her is if I spend quality time with her, not quantity time watching TV and all that stuff, quality time of just conversing with her. But it starts with simple habits. We don't got to run a marathon every day. We just got to walk for 15 minutes, So just implementing little things every single day and being cool with that. At first, it won't feel like you're moving that far, but gosh, in a year, you'll be like, whoa. And that can be for anything in our lives that we can do that in, but it's just about taking one small step. I would always see those memes that said, if you just posted one piece of content every single day for a year from now, your life would change. And everybody reads those and thinks, yeah, right. We did it and our life freaking changed like crazy, right? And so it's like as dumb as a meme is, it's the truth.
3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Welcome back to the No Have Cakes podcast. With me today is a man that I am honored to be in his presence. We have not yet met in person, but I will tell you this, the impact that he has had with just showing up and being vulnerable and transparent and open and honest about so many things, from professional development to marriage to just leadership of self. The impact that this man has had on me in just receiving some of those lessons and the openness in which he shares has been phenomenal, and I cannot wait to share that same with you. Today, I want to welcome my special guest, Mr. Tommy McAllister. So, Tommy, I thank you for joining me here, and really, again, it's an honor to share the stage with you here.
Jim, no, thank you so much for having me on. It's so cool the way God lines people up, right? Like you're saying, and I feel honored to say, to hear you say those things about me that, I've had an impact on you and whatnot, because sometimes the hardest thing that we can see is like ourselves and the impact that we have, right? We notice all the other things that maybe other people are doing in life, but sometimes we see ourselves for the things that we're not rather than the things that we actually are. So I'm humbled, especially coming from you, bro, for you saying those things. So thanks for having me on here.
I appreciate that. I really do, and I receive that. And I think one of the coolest parts that you get once you start combining people who are really just committed to pouring out and helping other people grow is really watching that impact spread. I sometimes talk about like the ripple effect when you throw a stone in the water and the impact, right? You control the impact, but the ripple, man, that just carries by itself and you can't necessarily control where it goes. But the more impact we can create, the more ripples get out there and the more, that multiplies out. And it gets me excited. I'm so excited to share that and see kind of how far it goes.
Yeah.
But,
you're so right on all that, right? Like I don't know, I've been using this a bunch the past 10 days, and honestly, it's usually from God. So here we are again, like I'll bring it up again here, but I always say, all we got to really do is bring the 5 loaves and 2 fish, right? Like let God really handle the rest of that. And so you're so right. We can be in charge of the 5 loaves and 2 fish, which is the impact, right? Like the ripple thing that where it hits the water, but all the rest of the ripple is going to let God handle that, right? But oftentimes where we start getting like off, maybe in our emotions or our feelings or comparisons or anything, that we're trying to control the ripple and all that other stuff. But it's like, no, man, let's just focus on the impact and all good things will happen from there. So that's a lesson God's really been showing it in my life a lot lately, which is usually because, being that I'm a coach, he usually puts me through scenarios so I can learn them and then teach them to other people. And so that's just one that's been popping up in my life a bunch lately.
That's good, man. That gives me 2 points that I just want to expand on. Number one is, I feel like the people who have a higher calling, right, some impact to give, whether it's a coach or a leader in some way, right? Because, a coach is leading other people. We can make the argument that it's the same for a leader of a business, community, household, right? They're leading a group. To me, I feel like that person who is called to that level of leadership, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's a business of 8,000 people or a family of 3, like you're going to be put through some things in the course of that are going to reveal who you are and teach you about yourself. And I think that's an important lesson to learn, because a lot of times we look at it like, man, why am I in this spot? And looking at the negative of things that are going on in our life rather than understanding, hey, it's helping you reveal something about your character, who you are. And just curious your thoughts on that.
Ooh, absolutely, right? Especially as a coach, right? Like I always tell people that I feel like because of just to give your listeners a little bit, is like I coach marriages, but primarily a lot more husbands is my favorite niche, but we do couples, and then my wife does lead the women. But a marriage, right, it usually, or no, 100% of the time, it usually starts going bad because of the individual problems that people are going through, and then they bring those frustrations to the marriage, right? And then it starts, causing other issues. But I always feel like God puts me through so many scenarios in life so I could learn them and then be able to teach those to other people, right? Is like the line I always like to use, was we're most qualified to lead the person that we used to be. And so it's like a blessing and a curse at the same time, where I'm so thankful. Like I absolutely love my purpose and my mission in life. Like I'm just beyond thankful for it. But at times it goes through the process, right? Because God's like, cool, you've learned this lesson, but yet there's somebody about to come into your life that I'm going to put into your life that's going through this, and maybe you don't have a ton of authority in this yet. So I'm going to allow some situations to come into your life. Maybe that's directly, or to a family member or another client or something. And now I go through that adversity. And in the meantime, it's not fun, right? But like when we step back, it's amazing. We just went through a wild 3-month season this past summer in multiple different aspects. And that's a long story. We don't need to, but I was just telling one of my clients on a one-on-one call today, like we're on the other side now in so many different areas. And I'm just like, man, God is so good. Like more testimonies, more God stories, more blessings. I've now got authority in these other things. But, it's like, if we can be trusted with little, we can be trusted with many, right? Well, leadership positions, as you're right, like if we want to be able to be trusted with many, we got to be able to show what the little things that we're going through. And so when those adversities come, it's oftentimes a testing and a proving ground. Okay, can you make this, right? It's like a Navy SEAL going through BUDS or something like that, right? They got to go through all this training before they earn that honor, right? And then they go through continuous more training to get to those higher levels. And so I really see that the same thing for business owners, coaches, whoever, to kind of go through those things.
Yeah, I think it illustrates an important point about partnerships. I think when you're looking at a partnership, whether it's you to your faith, you to a spouse, you to or someone in your business, I think one of the most important parts of partnership is the trust aspect and understanding, hey, if I want to serve my partner in the best way, and again, it doesn't matter if it's personal and professional, to be able to put their priorities first, to be able to serve them, and the attitude of service, right? Like I think too many people let the ego and the pride get in the way of being a servant and feel like, I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, I'm the boss, right? I want to hold that title. But to be able to put the title aside and to serve, and to just focus on serving as good as you humanly can, right? Whether again, that's serving your customers, your employees, your spouse, your kids, your community, to just serve. And understand that if we can all serve, and this is such a hard part for people to get because it does take a lot of trust and it takes the right people. But if you can put your heart into service, and I work here and I serve you, right? And I say, how can I show up today to serve Tommy in such a way that it will give him the best possible foot in the right direction? I'm trusting that you're going to do the same thing for me, right? That takes a lot of trust. But if both people in a relationship can put the other person first, man, that's where relationships really shine. And that's something that I've carried through relationships of mine, and something I've worked on perfecting over time. By no means perfect, but we're working on it. I'm curious, as someone who deals with relationships at such a deep level, your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, being a servant leader is everything, right? Like it's loving like Jesus does, right? Like he was the ultimate, like 100% God, right? And 100% man, but yet he was washing feet, right? In worldly sense, that doesn't make sense, right? Because we're like, oh man, if you're like this person, you're going to have servants and you're going to do all of this and da-da-da-da. But he got down to what I'm assuming is a pretty lowly thing to do for other people, right? Is like wash their feet. I mean, I don't think I've ever washed anybody's feet, literally washed anybody's feet other than my kids, and whatnot. So to actually do that, it shows us to live by his example, right? Just the other night, one of the disciplines that I have in my life every single day is, so I read one chapter in the Bible, non-negotiable every single day. And I'm in 1 John, and I was reading the second chapter the other night, and it was talking about if we want to basically paraphrase, if we want to know him, then we must live like him. Keyword, must live like him, right? Whereas oftentimes it's like we kind of do the buffet thing where we pick and choose. Well, it's like, man, if Jesus was washing feet, we got to wash feet. If Jesus loves and turns the other cheek and doesn't have any expectations or anything like that in a relationship, then we got to live that way. And it always comes back to just loving and serving. One tip that we can always do in a life, and something I try to practice myself too, on top of telling other people, obviously, is, man, like, if we're having like a frustrating moment, we're dealing with anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, pain, what always solves that? Just choosing to serve somebody in that moment, just turning to love. I'm going to reach out to somebody and just send them an encouraging message. I'm just going to go love on somebody in this moment. It's so, different than what the world would say, because typically when we go through pain or something, right, it's like, well, I'm going to have a drink, or maybe have a substance, I'm going to watch porn, I don't know, the last thing I want to do is go love on somebody. But if we choose love in that moment, like, one, we feel good, like it's kind of like giving a gift at Christmas, like it's unselfish because we're giving gift, but it's like kind of selfish because we get to feel really good by giving that gift. It's the same thing in that moment. So if we can just serve other people, good things happen. If we just choose love at all times, good things happen. But I see, at least typically in marriage, where it goes wrong is it's always the, well, what's in it for me attitude, the expectation. Okay, well, I'm going to mop the floors, I'm going to do the dishes, I'm going to maybe rub your shoulders because I'm hoping to get sex tonight, or I'm hoping for this, later in that. It's still the what's in it for me and then on the male side, like the females can smell that from a mile away. I know you're only doing this, all of that, because you're hoping to get X, Y, and Z. Whereas if we just do that stuff without ever expecting them to notice or give us an affirmation or appreciate us or have anything on the flip side of that we're going to get something from it, we're just doing it to love, great things happen. And I'm sure you're familiar with like the 5 love languages. I'm sure right? Most people are, right? So the 5 love languages, people always say, well, the 5 love languages are so amazing. And they are, but they're very surface level. And the reason I say that is, and this is something that me and Diane have just figured out over our time of coaching, is that, yeah, it's great if we do acts of service for somebody or physical touch or affirmations, but we're only going to do those things if we actually know the other person and actually really, really love the other person. Well, how do you get to do that? By having quality time at the number one, right? Where that's one of the 5 love languages. People are like, well, quality time's not really my thing. I'd rather just have affirmations. But if everybody can put that quality time at the number one, at the very deep, very top, you're going to want to do acts of service because I just love my wife so much because I know her. The only way I really get to know her is if I spend quality time with her, not quantity time watching TV and all that stuff, quality time of just conversing with her. So if I know her so well, I'm going to want to do those acts of service with nothing to get back from it. I'm going to want to affirm her without feeling like she needs to affirm me. I'm going to want to physically touch her without feeling the need that like, okay, well, maybe this will lead to something for me. I'm going to want to give gifts without ever expecting to get a gift back, because that's because I actually know her. Well, it's the same reason why Jesus wanted to love on us, right? Because he's God and he knows us. So of course he wants to serve us. So it's the same thing. If we actually know other people, we can really, really want to serve them. Now, should we serve everybody that same way? Absolutely. But especially in like a partnership of a marriage or a business, chances are you really know each other. Well, you should, but sometimes after a while, you don't really know the person other than just checking in with them. So, man, being servant leader, right, is everything. Love always literally wins every single time.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, but I can't because you're right. Like, and I think one of the hardest parts is it's not cool, I think, in public perception, typically for the man to be that. It's looked upon as weak or overly emotional or whatever it is, because men are supposed to be this macho masculine warrior who goes out there and fights and kills and does whatever it takes to go accomplish this thing. But part of the reason why I do this podcast and we have conversations like this is to be the one to stand up and say, no, that's not the only way. There's other ways to be a leader, to serve on people, and to be your authentic self and not have to worry about the judgment and the opinions of everyone else. And I'm certainly happy to stand up and say, hey, this is the way I love, this is the way I lead. And if it's not cool by you, that's fine, but it's not going to change, my position in that. So Thank you for standing firm in that. And I want to ask you this, because what you're speaking now it sounds great, right? And having that type of relationship with a partner, again, doesn't matter who that partner is, having that type of relationship where you can come to the other person and love on them and support them and be there for them and to receive that as well is amazing. But I feel like there was a time in my life where that felt impossible. right? And I don't know enough to speak on that for you, but I'm going to ask, has this always been that way? Or was there a point in time where it wasn't, and that led you down this path where now you're all in?
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, so me and my wife have been together now for 24 years, but been married for 17. She was 17 years old when we first got together. Had just turned 18. And so we have had a wild ride where, ironically enough, like I could talk forever, do podcasts, no big deal. Like, but in high school, I was literally the shyest kid in high school by far. Didn't talk to anybody, didn't kiss a girl until I was out of high school, like all this other stuff. And so when me and Diane started dating, she was my second girlfriend that I ever had, but it's just crazy. Like she's 100% the one. So I'm just so thankful God gave it to me so early on. But early on in our relationship, I just struggled with a lot of unworthiness, wanting other people's approval because I was so shy and never got attention and all of that. And so as I started coming out of my shell, I wasn't necessarily a good person, but because of that unworthiness, I also needed to try to fill that up. So I leaned on substances, eventually leaned on other women, even though I was still we weren't engaged or anything at the time. Not that that ever makes it okay. But other women, I cheated on my then girlfriend plenty of times because I was needing to fill that unworthiness. And we split up for 18 months after we had been together for 5 years, but it was the best thing for us. I'd always known God, went to a Catholic high school. My mom was very devout, but like I knew God, but that was like, I didn't have a relationship with him. Like I believed in God 100%, but that's where it stopped, right? Like, cool, I believe in you, but I'm going to be basically what Romans 12:2 says, don't conform to the patterns of this world. I conform to the patterns of this world while still loving. I wouldn't even use the word loving God, believing in God. But what I found out was conforming to the patterns of the world didn't scratch the itch one bit. And so when I was a drug addict during that time, I'd been to jail. I'd done a bunch of terrible things in my life. When I finally gave my life to Christ and literally changed almost literally overnight, like the type of person I really was, being that I had been forgiven, being that I had been through so much pain from addiction to all these other things, from losing everything in my life, I never wanted that to go away. So when Diane came back into my life, because the cool thing about my wife, she has probably my favorite testimony ever, is that she's always been this person that was even keel, just never too high, never too low. Nothing really bothered her, just loved on people and just did her thing. But I would also say she would tell you the same thing. So when I say this, she was just average. No real interests in life, no real anything in life. Just this there, right? But just a good, loving person. And so when we came back together, she was what I needed because I was so all over the place in my emotions, needing substances, needing women, needing the world, needing all of this, that when I found God, and God's just who he is, right? Just so peaceful and all of that, she was the perfect rock that I needed at that time to really stabilize me. And I had been with so many other crazy women during that time that we were apart, that it was evident and clear that nobody holds a candle that I had been dating or sleeping with or doing anything with that held a candle to my wife. When she came back into my life, I knew there was no way that I could ever let her go again, because I had now been on both sides of the track, the patterns of the world, and I've been on there with women. I've done all these other things, but now I know what it's like to have God with her, and I never wanted to let that go. And so when we got back together, we still would have an argument from here to here and there, but really not that often. We lived a pretty simple life. We lived in a small town that only had 30,000 people in it, in the Northern California, in the middle of nowhere. So it was just a simple life. And so we weren't entrepreneurs at the time. We both had very simple jobs, a lot of limitations in our life, but we didn't know there was more for us. So life really wasn't too crazy until God called us to more. And that's when it got a little more wild. But during that process, I always tell people it's probably been about 10 years since me and my wife have had an argument or anything of that sort. It's like we don't even have disagreements. Somebody the other day said, okay, well, you guys don't argue, but you guys have disagreements and stuff. And I'm like, honestly, not really. And it all stems back to what you were saying there, Jim, is because we just love each other and just serve each other, that I don't need to win in an argument. Maybe she says something and I'm just like, cool. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. Okay. Then I'll tell her about my things. And because there's no expectations or anything, we get to see each other's heart so much that it is what it is, because we know both sides. We just want each other to win so much that it comes back to that. So it wasn't always that in the beginning, But for, I would probably say 10 years now, it's been that, but it just gets better. But it only gets better because, and this is maybe a little weird way to say it, I always tell people, and it's maybe because of the shock factor, that I get to have sex with a new wife every month and she gets to have sex with a new husband every month. But that's because we keep growing with Christ every month. We keep growing in our physical every month, our mental, our relational, every aspect of our life, we're growing. So we get to see new wrinkles in each other, which then we get to affirm each other. We get to champion each other. We get to do that, which then only grows us closer because we see each other growing rather than staying stagnant and then kind of being let down from each other. But every day she's growing and every day I'm growing. So we're just like, man, you killed it today. Yeah, you killed it today. And it's just like, so then it gets to these spots where it is just service and love. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but that's just kind of where we're at.
That's awesome. That's it's a whole lot of life to live. And I feel like I don't want to skip past that part because there's so many nuggets in what you said. And I feel like a lot of people who listen will feel like at a certain point they are also unworthy for whatever reason. And that could be not feeling loved. It could be not feeling confident. It could be not accepted, right? Loved, seen, heard, and appreciated, right? Those are the needs that we got to fill. And if you're not feeling those things, it could lead you to feel unworthy. It could lead you to feel like you don't deserve this or that. And a lot of times people are going to self-sabotage themselves to get into a spot where they push the thing away because it's easier just to, fulfill that prophecy themselves rather than have to worry about being disappointed later on. And, so honor to you for, going through all that and being vulnerable and transparent and standing up in it and owning those things. And I just want to ask, going through that, like the feelings of doubt, of not good enough, like how do you address those in that moment? Like take me back to when you were first going through that. Did you feel like, man, it's never going to be for me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Looking back now, man, like it's so crazy because I'm about to turn 43. Like it's been, over 20 years ago now, but it's so crazy how life can change, and just the Bible verse that kind of goes, this is the Bible verse that's outside my kid's door. And I read it every single time I come up the stairs because the whiteboard's right there. And I do not skip it ever. It's John 13:7, where it says, you do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand, right? I didn't understand that then, one, because I wasn't reading the Bible, and two, I probably wouldn't have understood that what that Bible verse meant now. Now at 43, I can look back and be like, oh yeah, all these things happened and here's how they play out. And this is why God has a purpose for my life. And I watched how it all played out and blah, 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 blah. I can see that now. But in that moment, I 100% played the comparison game or just felt like these are just the cards I dealt. I didn't realize that God has a specific purpose and plan for every single person on this earth, right? There's not one person that doesn't have a purpose and plan for their life. Now, are we all supposed to be billionaires? Are we all supposed to play in the NFL or whatever that may be? No, right? There are people who have different worldly standard things for their life, but it doesn't mean it's not as equally as important as anybody else. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand because I was a mediocre athlete back then that like, man, woe me. Everybody else is just more talented for me. Or maybe because I was, not as good looking back then that, man, I got another bad dealt hand, or I came from a rough family. Yep, everybody else has it easier than me, right? Well, not realizing that nobody has it easier than you. Everybody has different cards, and it's the way you play them, right? And what you do into them. And so I just recognizing, I don't think at the time I recognized it as unworthiness. Now I did looking back, I see that as unworthiness. I just felt like, man, this is just what it is. And this is the way life's going to be for me. And so I probably didn't address the reason I just wanted to change back then was because I was tired of living that way, right? Like, I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be addicted to a substance. I don't want to wake up every day feeling like this is terrible. So when I changed, I still had a lot of limitations in my life. Still thinking a lot of those same things, but just not turning to substance and doing all of that. Still had a relationship with God, knowing, and you said it so good earlier, like certain people have like these callings on our life to maybe like do more, right? And I knew it from the time I was in my 20s, but because I was such a limiting thinker and unworthy that I didn't like, how do I do that? Like, there was nobody in my town doing anything, nothing. Well, now, like, that's why I love community so much, and I roll with Steve and the whole crew, right? Like, everybody's doing something, like, and it's so contagious, right? Like, And looking forward, obviously that's where I can be now, but then I didn't understand it. But it wasn't until I got out of that environment of where I was living and changed up everything in my life that things started going in a different direction. I always say 3 people need to do 3 things. And if we repeat this cycle all the time, like, we'll be good. We need to change our patterns and ways is number 1. Number 2, we need to change our thinking. And number 3, we need to develop new habits, right? As long as we just keep doing those and rinse and repeating, we'll be good, right? So for me, that was leaving a city that had nobody really doing anything in their life and was all limiting thinking and having those, and then moving and doing a lot of different stuff. But it's just that unworthiness holds so many people back, brother. And I think it's the number 1 thing that I see in all different areas of life and things that are holding marriage back. And because when you start believing that, man, like, devil will put the frustration in there, and then everything else is on the table. And so it becomes really frustrating for a lot of people. But you don't have to believe those lies, right? Because as it says in the Bible, God doesn't give you a spirit of fear, right? And so we just got to stop believing it, but then we got to go prove it, right? Because faith without works is dead. Then we got to go prove it to ourselves that we have this purpose, so when we take the action on it. But man, it's such a tough spot to be in when you have that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I think especially if you don't have the relationship with failure or have a really off definition of success, it puts you at such a disadvantage. I can't emphasize enough understanding that success is not being a billionaire, right? Because a lot of people look at, if I don't make X amount of money, I'm not successful. And I was one of them. I used to define my success by what car was in the driveway, how the house looked, what money was in the bank. Like, that was the traditional definition of success for me. And that's what I pursued for a number of years, because that's what I grew up doing. I started my first business at 8 years old, made a bunch of money for an 8-year-old with no bills. Like, I was on top of the world, and I felt, hey, this is awesome. Let's keep doing that. Again, up until the point where I came home and realized my wife didn't know me. Like, I had no relationship. I wasn't there for my kids. I didn't even know myself. Like, I was a shell of a person. Sure, I was successful by social media standards, but like, what did it mean? Yeah. And I think, what you said before, like, your 3 things are all awesome, right? Those are great things to do, to be able to go out and change and repeat daily. But I think the part a lot of people trip up on is, it seems like a mountain that's too big to climb. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, cool. That's awesome. I'd love to do that. Where do I get started, and how do I physically do it? Because I think it could be a very lonely place to feel like, first of all, it's difficult to admit, right? Again, ego and pride aside, admit that, like, I'm not happy with where I am. Because that sucks. It sucks to make that admission. So, again, I want to give you honor for standing up here and letting other people know, like, it's totally okay to admit that you've made some mistakes in the past. You could do it too. But where do you go as far as, like, how do you start implementing that change? Like, climbing out of the rut that you've created is obviously the hardest part until you start building some of that positive momentum and a new rut in a positive direction. But where do you get around the mindset and the people, and how do you start making that change toward growth?
Yeah. Oh man, I can touch on a lot of that little stuff that you just touched there, but just on that specific question, the way we coach in our program, it's all about actionable steps and being disciplined, right? So, okay, here's this, do this every single day, right? Like, it's just the small wins, whereas exactly what you said, people see it as the biggest, the big mountain, right? I'm sure you've probably read the book, The Gap and the Gain, probably, right? And so many people, for whoever hasn't, it's right, you're measuring from where you're at to how far you have to go. Well, that gap is full of anxiety, depression, insurmountable, things that might not be able to happen. So then we're looking how far we have to go rather than always measuring how far we've come. Well, if we just take one action today, we can look back and say, well, I'm just that much farther than I was yesterday. I don't have to lose. If it's just simple as like a weight loss, I got to lose 50 pounds. That seems like a lot. Yeah. Well, did you eat clean yesterday? Did you go to the gym? Did you get some good sleep? Yeah. Okay. Well, then were you doing that for the past 8 years? No. Well, dude, you just won one day. Do it tomorrow, right? Again, it's the drop from, like, you put a glass under a faucet, right? And it starts dripping just one drop at a time. You're going to be like, this thing's never going to fill up, right? But what's going to happen? It eventually will, because it slowly drips in. The cool part about that is we'll learn to have gratitude for where we've come because of that slow drip. If all of a sudden tonight we woke up and we started a business, and tomorrow it was an 8-figure business and it was just going, one, we probably wouldn't be ready for it. We probably wouldn't be great leaders and we'd squander it. But even if we didn't squander it, like we wouldn't really feel like all that great because it was just overnight. But when we have to earn it and work for it, it feels really, really good, right? And this might come off bad, but this is sometimes why I'm against people getting like a weight loss surgery, right? It's because it's like the journey of you losing that weight is what's going to make it stay off. It's going to give you the discipline. It's going to inspire other people rather than just say, hey, I'm going to get this surgery and it's just going to be over with. Well, maybe, right? But the inside of what's going on in you didn't change. But because we're going to grind and we're going to do these disciplines day in and day out, we're going to get there. But it starts with simple habits. We don't got to run a marathon every day. We just got to walk for 15 minutes, So implementing little things every single day and being cool with that. At first, it won't feel like you're moving that far, but gosh, in a year, you'll be like, whoa, like I've come so far, right? And when you really start looking back, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm done to this, this, and this, or I've done this and this. It doesn't feel like it in the moment, right? Because it becomes the new normal. It's why when you maybe have lost, and not trying to turn this into a fitness thing, but like if you've lost a lot of weight, other people will really notice it if they haven't seen you for a period of time. But we don't notice it because we see ourselves every day. So it becomes the new normal every single day. So we're like, I haven't really gone that far, but somebody else is going to be like, man, you've grown so much. And that can be for anything in our lives that we can do that in, but it's just about taking one small step. If you don't know Jesus, accept him into your life, or maybe not even that. Get a Bible, go to a church service. Doesn't mean you have to do everything at once. Just do one thing, right? And in anything we can do that in, but it just starts with those one little habits. And I know that's so cliche, but literally that's how we get here. My wife and I's business is basically to a certain extent, primarily run off of all organic traffic on social media. Years ago, before our business was really even developed, I would always see those memes that said, if you just posted one piece of content every single day for a year from now, your life would change. And everybody reads those and thinks, yeah, right. We did it and our life freaking changed like crazy, right? And so it's like as dumb as a meme is, it's the truth. If you just did 30 minutes of walking every single day for a year, your life will change. If you read one chapter in the Bible every single day for a year, your life will change. If you celebrated your wife every single day for a year, your life would change. If you reached out to a friend and just checked in on somebody every single day for a year, your life would change. It's the compound effect, right? But most people can't do it for a year because they see it as this big thing. It's why New Year's resolutions only last for 2 weeks for most people, right? Because they see the bigger picture. It's like, man, it's so big. Man, I'll be real with dude. Normally when I tell this story, people don't know it, but you'll get it, right? Because Steve said, his darkest day of his life was when he won the Super Bowl, right? When he was looking out the window of the hotel and everybody's celebrating. They're talking about him on the ESPN for like setting records for a punter. And he was like, dude, this is the worst day of my life. Well, why was it the worst day of his life? He just accomplished a goal that he set when he was 11 years old and just accomplished it. Why is it the worst day of his life? Because he had put these expectations that it would solve all those problems, didn't enjoy the journey. Well, that's the journey about just doing the little things. And so I think most men, especially entrepreneurs, CEOs, things like that, right? We have a hard time living in the present moment, just enjoying a simple dinner with our family without thinking, okay, tomorrow I need to do this. And then next quarter, I'm going to accomplish this. And next year, I want to be able to hit, like we always are forward thinking. Not that that's bad, but we have a hard time living in the moment. Well, we're going to accomplish all those things. And chances are they're not going to feel as good as they thought we did, but we just sacrificed a year to get them. And so we're let down because we set an expectation. Remove any of those expectations from our life and just do one thing every day. And then maybe add 2, 3. That's how we start, but just don't set an expectation that you're going to need to be doing a billion things right out the gate.
Yeah, I agree. I think, when you compound that with surrounding yourself with positive relationships, whether that's your spouse, whether that's your friends, like you can go so much further when you're surrounded by people who are all going in the same direction, who are going to hold you accountable, who are going to keep you moving in that right direction. And, I think a lot of people look at their relationships as, friends. Hey, I grew up in the same geographic area as these people. They're my friends. Cool. Like, you don't have to necessarily get rid of them, but you've got to understand just because you grew up in an area, that doesn't make them the best people to support you for the rest of your life, right? You got to go out and actively seek relationships with where you want to grow. And again, they could be the same people, but don't let it just be, I knew these people for a long time. That's who I got. Like, actively seek out things that are going to stretch you a little bit, right, to that next level. But that's uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable for people to admit, I have work to do. I can improve. And I think really before you even get to the step of growing every day, people got to be willing to put down the armor and say, I'm not perfect, right? I can improve. And I think that to me is one of the hardest things. And again, I'll speak for men that I've seen. You've got this expectation that you've got to be this stone-faced, super confident, never show emotion, just go out there and hustle and grind your way to do all these different things. But that's not real. And that's the story that everyone keeps saying. And when people are like, man, I don't feel that way, but you got to put on this mask to go out there because that's what you see as the expectation. Yeah. Right. Then you're left feeling like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should be something else. And, I think, again, that's why I wanted to be here and to stand up and say, hey, it's not the only way, right? You can lead as a servant. You can lead with love. And I think once you start to really lean into that, you're going to see the fruit is not only more plentiful, freaking tastes better too. So, I can't put enough emphasis on the importance of relationships in growth. I think it's such a huge part and people don't give it enough attention.
I 100% agree with everything you just said there, Jim. It's something I always encourage everybody with because that's what honestly changed my life. One, when I moved out of my hometown, because especially 30,000 people, that's what it was. Everybody knew everybody. And like I said, nobody was really doing anything to better their lives. And so when I moved, I had to find new people. But when I moved to Vegas, 3 months into the pandemic, so everything shut down. I couldn't meet anybody. Literally what changed my life was when I met Steve, and that's a whole God story in itself. But when I got surrounded with Steve and started flying out to Texas once a month, like I started attracting those type of people into my life because I was starting to hold myself to new standards, right? But that was the biggest thing is I always tell people this, and I got a ton of hate. I got so many messages from friends who were still kind of friends, but from other friends who aren't really friends anymore that would tell other friends, Tommy thinks he's better than all of us. Oh, he moved. Look who he's hanging out with. He doesn't hang out with us anymore. He thinks he's cool. Like, and it was like, no, I don't think I'm better than you at all. I just know God has more for me in my life, and I got to go see what that is because I'm not getting that from you guys. And so a lot of times it's hard when we tell people, I'm sure the same thing for you, like, hey, you got to distance yourself from your friends and I use it all the time. Just because you went to high school with them doesn't mean you're meant to do life with them because chances are their habits are bleeding over into yours, right? Like, I don't want to hang out with people who don't really maybe pursue God or don't want to talk about growth-driven stuff, and maybe all they want to do is suck back beers and talk trash to each other and maybe dog their wife. Like, I don't want to be involved in any of that because that becomes a cancer, right? It becomes the fruit that now comes over into your life, and that's a game I can't even be close to because we like to think we're strong enough. Most people guys will be like, oh, I'm stronger than that. That won't impact me. It will. It will slowly seep into your subconscious mind. Then when you're having a weak day and you're hanging out with your friends and something happens, next thing you know, you're being watered down. So I can't harp on that enough. We have to surround ourselves with people. I always say, here's 3 things again, but we all need to have identity, right? We all need to have obedience to God, and we all need to have community, but that community needs to be filled with people who have identity and obedience to God. And if you have that, man, that's a winning formula right there. To really leveling up in life. So
I strongly agree. So let me ask you a question here because I'm going to go back in time a little bit from my side of things. There was a time where, for all intents and purposes, my wife was a single mom. And it wasn't because I was out doing anything, quote unquote, wrong. But I would spend my time, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go to work, try and provide for the house, because that was the identity I had. I was the provider. I didn't know enough about being a father, being a husband. I knew how to go produce. So that's what I did. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, drove to work, earned some money, came home once the work was done. And usually it was like 8, 9 o'clock at night. And what it would do is leave my wife to be home by herself all day long, taking care of 2 kids, trying to keep a house, and then I'd be frustrated when we didn't have a relationship. Like, I'm in the mindset of, hey, I'm out there producing for you. I come home and where's the fanfare, right? And looking back on it, it's embarrassing to even think that that was a mindset that I was capable of, but it's common. Like, and I think more people need to understand that that's not an attitude of servant leadership. That's not like the hustle and grind culture, which is popular, is not how you properly serve somebody, because their needs are not being met either.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to share that with you, first of all, for my own transparency, because it's something that I sucked at as a husband. Right. And again, it needs to be said, like, it's okay to fail and it's okay to suck at things if you understand and you can own it, and then you can positively work on improving it. And I'll work every damn day on improving that. But the first step is admitting that you sucked at it. And, you know, I want to emphasize that story for people who just maybe haven't heard it, or feel like maybe they can relate. Maybe you're in a spot where you feel like you need to hustle and grind your way to success. But what's the cost? The cost is when you come home and you realize you don't have a relationship. You've got a roommate at best. You don't know your kids. You've got a partner that resents you more than loves you because you left him alone to do X, Y, and Z. And, you know, I want to share that. B, I'm just curious for your thoughts on how to own that situation when you're in it, because it's hard to admit that. And so, you know, as someone who deals with that for other people a lot, like when someone's sitting in that position where maybe they're in this phase of their life where they don't have that depth of relationship.
Yeah.
How do you start to own that?
Man, you know, I can relate so much with that, to the grind, the redlining things and working. And honestly, I'll tell you what, I work with so many men who do the exact same thing. And that's why their relationship's there with where it's at, because their order and structure in their life is out of place, right? Like I always say, it needs to go God, self, marriage, kids, then business. The only reason I say self second is not so we can go out and just live wild and play golf and things like that. It's where are we at with our relationship with God, the personal development stuff. So I bring a full cup to my marriage, then my marriage overflows onto my kids, and then business comes last, right? Not that typically business still has to require more time, because that's just where we go and do it. But typically a lot of people put the business first, and they say, well, business is first because it's all for my family. And when people say that, it always rubs me really, really wrong, because as you said there, Jim, so much, like it was your identity, right? Usually our identity is, okay, what's the zeros in my bank account? I'm known as a person who's a leader. I'm known as a person who does X, Y, and Z as business. So it's for our identity. Are we willing to remove that from our life to go do that for our family? Most men know, because that's our identity, is our business. And so we say it's for our family, and yes, it is to a certain extent, right? Because we're paying the mortgage, we're feeding them, we're doing all that, maybe putting college funds away and all that. But really, if somebody said, well, cool, dude, I can give you $2 million, but you got to quit your business and never do it again. Most people who have real rooted, deep identity rooted in it would not do it, right? They would be like, well, no, like now what am I going to say about myself that I have? And so our structures are all out of place. And then when you come home, you're so right, because we demand respect, right? And maybe not as like demanding as that, but we in and roundabout are, but we don't
You at least
command
expect
respect.
it.
Yeah. We expect to get it because we're working really, really hard. In worldly sense, you think that would happen, but the number one way that people always, and it's cliche, they say, how do you spell love? Time, right? Your wife wants time with you. Your kids want time with you. They want to just spend time with you. That's great. You can buy them trips to Disneyland or give them the bag or the nice house. At the end of the day, really, does that really move the needle forward in happiness? Not really, too much, you know, it's kind of fleeting. So they want that time with you. Well, how do we get that respect? We have to command it. When they know that we love working and that we're doing all this, but we're making a sacrifice in that to come home and be with them because we value family dinners, or we value getting X amount of time with them, or we value being at our kids' games and being able to drive them there and having great conversations or whatever that is, and they know that you're making that sacrifice, that commands respect. When they know you're still getting everything done in the way, you're not letting the stress from work getting brought home, or the home stressing you out, and now we're acting and saying different things that are out of character and morals and not of Christ, then that's not going to give us the ability to command that respect. But when we can command the respect, it's from the way we're leading ourselves and all of that, and giving them the things they need. That's how we'll get it, but we'll never be able to demand it. Then it puts pressure on them, it puts frustration on them, and then it puts expectations on us, and then we're just let down in so many different areas of that. And so many men struggle with that, and it is so hard to tell ourselves that I can do better. Obviously the second commandment, now obviously the first one is love and honor, worship God, right? Is that one. But the number two is love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? Key word about that is as you love yourself. So we got to make sure that we love ourselves. And oftentimes we're burying ourselves in work because we're trying to fill up our cup and our worth with money that's, like we said, is not really going to move the needle forward. When we can just truly love ourselves and be really good with that, we're going to be able to love on our kids and our wives so much better. But we got to start with that love for ourselves. But it starts with looking in the mirror and saying, dude, are you really doing like living like Christ? As I said earlier in that First John chapter, like we must live like Christ. Am I being this? And if the answer is no, then we need to call ourselves out. One of the exercises I have people do is go to 1 Corinthians and go through the love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, it does not, that whole verse, and replace it with your name. Tommy is patient, Tommy is kind, Tommy doesn't envy, he doesn't brag, he doesn't boast. If I can go through that and not be like, ooh, then I know I'm doing good. But if I go through it and I can't say that is the truth, then I know I need to change. There's nothing wrong with calling ourselves out and just being real with ourselves. Doesn't mean that we're not giving ourselves grace, but we have to be able to do that, because when we recognize the truth, then we can actually get growth. But if we don't see the truth, then we'll never be able to grow. We don't know what we need to fix. It'd be like having our hand on a stove and our hand's burning and we're like, my hand's burning. And we're like, yeah, take your hand off the stove. Nah, I think it's something else. And you're like, no, take your hand off the stove. It's like, it must be, it's like, well, dude, just get the truth that your hand's on the stove. And when we get 100% honest and real with ourselves and with everybody, there is no pressure. There is just freedom. Like you were saying, just be yourself. And we can just be free with ourselves and be good with ourselves, and we can be good with everybody else. But that just starts with us saying, hey, I can be better. I literally can be better. And that's not because you're not enough of who you are. It's just the parable of the talents, where the guy had 5, turned it to 10, right? The guy who had the one who didn't do anything with it wasn't actually doing bad in life, right? Like he didn't say it was getting worse. He just kept it the same. We're called to be better. Well, as any business owner, how do you grow your business? You sit back down, you look at spreadsheets, charts, actions, all of this, and go through your KPIs. Well, this is what I need to do to get better. We got to do it with our life, right? And be able to say, man, am I really doing X, Y, and Z? And it hurts because we don't ever want to feel like we're not doing enough as a man. But I'll tell you what, the man who can be vulnerable and be real is the strongest man out there. You're strong for holding it in, but you're even stronger for just sharing your thoughts and being real with yourself, saying, I can be better.
I agree. And I think there's so much strength in the vulnerability and the transparency and the honesty of just showing up as your authentic self and not worrying about the judgment or the criticism or the hate or whatever is going to come your way, for standing up in who you are and being that. And I know that it takes a lot to get to that point. But I think one of the biggest things that I could add in there is surrounding yourself with people who are going to unconditionally love you. And if you don't have people in your life who are going to hold you accountable, who are going to love you, who are going to support you, then go find them. Because there's 8 freaking billion people on this planet or more. Like, they exist. I'll say there's 2 of them on this podcast right now. Like, if you can't find those people in your life, keep looking. And if you still can't find them, let me know. I'll hook you up with some. But having those people in your life will give you a platform to express yourself in a way that you know you're good. And I think one of the most important things I can share about having communication in a relationship that I've learned, and I'm curious your thoughts on it, is when you love someone, you have the hard conversations with them, even if they hurt. Because loving someone is helping them to be themselves and to be the best version of themselves that you know that they're capable of being. And telling them something just to appease them because you don't want to hurt them or you don't want them to feel bad, that's not serving them. That's not what love is. Love, when you love somebody, you're willing to put your friendship on the line. You're willing to burn the place down if they don't receive it well, because you know it's in their best interests. And it's not, am I afraid to say something because maybe they'll take it the wrong way and they won't call me for dinner tomorrow. Like, that's not what love is. That's not what service is. You need to be able to remove that part and really honor that person and give them absolutely everything that they need to be the best version of themselves possible.
Yes. So well said, brother. I always say the person that holds somebody accountable and challenges them loves them so much more than the person who lets them settle and stay the same. And it's hard, right? Because especially in the culture we live in now, where it's just like, don't hurt anybody's feelings, don't do anything like that. And it's like, no, we're not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. We just know that there's a better way, or that we all could be a little bit better. And I know you got to where you're at and continuing to grow because of what you just said. I know I've gotten that same spot. That's what I love about having men in my life who can I can be honest with. They can take a look at my life and they can say, hey, dude, you got to do a little bit better in these areas. Or I know you can do this, or I know you can do that. It's like, man, because sometimes we don't believe in ourselves. We need somebody else to believe in us, but that's them having those tough conversations. I always say my wife is my favorite transformation out of everybody that we've ever worked with. Multiple reasons, but because like I told you earlier in the call, she was always just even kill person. But now she coaches men and women all over the world. And I promise you that's almost like me saying that I'm going to be on the Lakers next year and playing for them. Like, that's how crazy of it that it is that it is that now. But she got to that spot because once I started leading myself well and better and showing her possibility due to my habits, my discipline, and speaking that into her, not like forcing it onto her, just letting her watch that, then those conversations, because of our quality time, would be like, what's your thoughts on this, babe? Or she would be vulnerable with me, because most of the time, most women, if they know they're out of shape, right, or something, they're going to be like, I'm just too busy, or I don't care about that. They do. They just don't want to say that they care about it. Or vice versa. Man, well, we're so close that she was able to tell me those things. Well, so then how am I going to help her? I'm not going to be like, harping on her, you need to go do this. Like, no, I just loved on her and served her and said, well, babe, let's come up with a plan. Like, what do you think is something doable that we could do, and this and that other? So then I would challenge her and hold her accountable. Well, fast forward into our business. There was multiple times where she would come in, because she worked the same job for 19 years, barely above minimum wage. And so she was just that person who just never grew out of her limitations. So now being an entrepreneur, coaching men and women all over the world was so out of her comfort zone. So there was so many times she would walk in the door from either being out grocery shopping or just being somewhere, and she would just lay her head in my lap and just cry and just cry. Well, then that moment I could have just said, you know, babe, maybe it's just better you go get a regular job. Or in that moment, I can speak the word of God in it and say, Joshua 29:11, you know, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans for a hope in the future. I can speak God's word and promises over her. I can also say, but babe, look how far you've come and look where you're at now from then and there. And I could say, babe, this is what we just need to do and keep going and growing. We need to clean up some of this. And by doing that, that was amazing. And she was able to come in. Now she's a straight killer, which is like the farthest thing that I could ever have said would happen. But I've watched that in so many men's lives as well happen and just be these leaders. Before we even turned this podcast on, we were talking about a friend of ours named Rick Nappy, who lives out in New Jersey. When I met Rick, dude was broken. I was broken in certain ways, right? Rick is like the most strongest dude, killing it from New Jersey out there right now. Starts men's groups. He's doing all this amazing things out there. But it started with him getting real and saying, hey, I need to change. And then importing a group of men into it who are going to see him for his greatness, but also say, bro, you got to do better. You got to do better here, here, and here. But here's how you do that. And I'm going to support you through it, but you got to do the work, you know? And so it's so important to get those people around you.
I agree strongly. You know, it reminds me of this, I don't know, you want to call it saying, quote, whatever, that came to mind at a certain phase in my relationship with my wife. And, you know, I think in my personality, I tend to want to fix things, right? I have a lot of coaching conversations with people, and people bring me problems, and I'm like, all right, you know, here's a problem, Jim, figure out how to fix it. So you come into this being like, all right, I'm going to approach it the same way because it's what you're used to. And it does not work well. You can't treat your spouse as your client and try to fix them. And it will not end well. So one of the things that I heard, which was a blessing to hear, was you don't need to understand me. You need to love me. And I think oftentimes we're like, man, I'm just trying to figure them out, know what makes them tick, because you're trying to figure out, if I know the equation, I know how I can tweak it to get the output that I want. Mm-hmm. But that's a human, right? It's not a math equation. You're not doing calculus. You're dealing with someone's life. So instead of trying to figure out what makes that person tick so you can adjust the inputs to get the output you want, just shut up and love them. Mm-hmm. Like, just show up and support them and serve them and just be there for them and support them. Hold them accountable, but stop trying to figure things out. Stop trying to fix everything. Just
Yeah.
support them, and show them what's possible. And I think they take it from there and understand, oh, okay, cool. I've got a safe space that I can go and push my limits a little bit, because I know if I fail, when I fail, I've got a partner who's behind me, who's going to support me, and he'll be there for me. And he'll give me a spot to feel loved, seen, heard, and appreciated, and, encourage me to continue going forward. So I just want to share that. Just came to my heart, and I felt called to share it.
So good. You're so right. Guys most of us are fixers, and gosh, I would say 95% of people we work with are that same problem, where they're like, yeah, their wife is telling them their feelings or whatever, and they're like, yeah, we'll just do this, this, and this. But by us doing that, basically what we're saying is, well, you're doing it wrong, rather than just saying, well, validate them. Maybe they're actually doing it right. They just need to keep going, right? Or whatever. Let's just listen and love, right? You said it best. That's all we got to do. And if they ask for advice, give advice, right? But it's hard because we can maybe see that they're doing something wrong. Like maybe they're on a diet and they're not losing weight, right? Because they're putting ranch dressing all over it, and we're like, well, babe, you just know that you probably ate more calories than if you ate a cheeseburger because you put all that ranch all over it, right? Like that's not going to go over well. But if they ask, and we just love on them, it just starts with the love. You're so right. We can't be fixers in everything. It has to be a safe space. Everybody wants to grow in some way, shape, or form, but we just don't want to do it because somebody else is telling us to do it. I don't know about you, but that's why I had so much resentment from my dad when I grew up, because one, he led by saying, don't do as I do, do as I say. And he was not doing anything good. And two, he would just want me to do it because of his expectations on me, rather than I want to do it because I want to do it, right? And so when somebody else just wants to do it, for me, it almost pushes it away when, like, if I have to tell my spouse, well, you need to go be this. For the longest time, I tried to make my wife me, because I was good at content and I was good at just freestyling on this. Well, that's not her forte. She has her own qualities that are amazing. But I was always like, babe, I don't get it. Like, why can't you do this, this, and this? Like, you need to start doing this, this, and this. She's like, I'm not you. And honestly, this is where a community came in. A friend in my life said, bro, I've been through this, and stop trying to make your wife you. He's like, I'm a business owner. My wife works with me too. Stop. I tried to make her me, but that's not how it works, right? It's, as we talked about earlier, God gives us all unique talents and traits for our own lives. If he wanted us all the same, we wouldn't need each other, but I need my wife because she's so different than me. She needs me because I'm different than her. I need Jim in my life because you're so different than me, vice versa. That's what makes us all so connected, because we're so different. And so, yeah, that's such a great point, bro.
Thank you. If you got time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Because I got a question that I feel is relevant and important, and I want to share it. Let's talk submission, because this is an area that I think a lot of people as leaders, as partners, get incredibly wrong. In the mindset that your wife, or, again, we'll draw parallels between professional and personal, but a lot of men are like, hey, the woman is supposed to submit to the husband, and they end it there. And they have this expectation that, basically, let me sum it up, like, your wife is your servant, right? Anything that you need, she's supposed to put you as the priority, and then it ends there. And I want to address 2 points. One is that's not the whole story. It should be both ways. Okay, you should submit to her as well. And number 2 is submission is not weakness, because I know there's a lot of people who listen to this like, if I submit, I'm showing weakness. I'm the weaker person, and a lot of guys are taught never to show weakness, right? But submission is strength. You have to be able to control that, to be able to hold on to the trust and the faith that your partner is going to serve you in the same way, and understand that it's really, they have the ability to do it, but they are trusting you, right? And vice versa. And that submission is such an important part of proper relationships that I feel like people need to understand that it's not a one-way street. It goes both ways, and it's not a weakness. And I just would love you to speak on that.
I know, isn't it? Because it's the weird word, right? Like submission in like life sounds bad, right? Or sometimes as Christians we talk about surrendering to God, right? And that word almost has weakness in it as well. Like, oh, surrendering, we're waving the white flag, we're giving in, right? Like in war terms. Or there's so many words that mean like multiple different things, and so we kind of take them in the wrong way. But the thing about submission is, I see this all the time. Everybody brings that up. Well, she's not submitting to me. She's not doing what the Bible says. Well, it's like, well, actually, you're not doing what the Bible says because you're leaving out the other part of that verse that says we're supposed to, the wife's supposed to be submit to the husband. Well, the other part of that is if the husband is loving on her like Christ loved the church. Well, what did Christ do for the church? Gave up his whole life and died for the church. So we have to analyze our life and say, am I willing to die for my wife? Am I doing the things, dying to self on the daily for my wife? Like we were circle back earlier saying, am I willing to come home from work early and maybe lose some finances because I'm going to come home and die for die to myself, for her? Like, am I willing to do those things? People like to leave out the things that don't serve them, right? Well, I just want to focus on the part that says submission. She's supposed to submit to me. Well, yeah. We always talk about a Proverbs 31 woman, man. Like that's what they're supposed to do. Well, in Proverbs 31 most people leave out the one verse that speaks about the man where it says he serves at the king's gates and hangs out with the elders. Exactly what you've been talking about, Jim. The community. Well, the elders are people who are respected members of the communities. Do us as men, as husbands, hang out with respected members of the community? I'm not talking worldly respected because of their finances and things like that. Respected men of high caliber, high character, and high values that are respected for who they are and not of like what the worldly things are that they have. And if we're hanging out with them, chances are we're going to have the Proverbs 31 woman. And if we're going to get our wife to submit to us, not that like, well, I'm going to die to myself so I can get her to submit. No, but like if we're just doing that out of love, like we are doing those things, willing to die to self for her, then she'll just submit, right? It's like we come in one thing, but it starts with us leading with that, and then she'll do that, right? So many times in marriage, people think, I'm reading a great book right now. It's called Every Man's Battle. We're going through it in our Bible study in my neighborhood, and it's about like purity and sexual stuff. But I had a great chapter where it was talking about so many men think that once they get married, it's just going to be a sex fest, right? Like, oh man, I'm married now. Like she's going to have to submit to me all the time. We're going to be in the house together. And it's going to be this. It's like, that's not what it is. Can that happen? Absolutely. If you're hanging out with the elders, if you're doing all of this, if you're commanding respect, that will happen. But what are we doing to get it to those spots? There's nothing wrong with submitting to each other. Like God's ways are not our ways, right? Like the world's ways. And it's because it's so hard to understand the way that life really works. We want to have all these fleshly things, these fleshly desires. Galatians 5 talks about that if we're of the flesh, we won't be able to satisfy the desires of the spirit. And if we're of the spirit, we're not going to have satisfy the desires of the flesh. So there's always this constant tug back and forth, right? But if we can just submit to him, it's so amazing. I had a cool moment the other day where I was watching Stephen Furtick. I don't know. Stephen Furtick's kind of like just the GOAT to me. I think he kills it in so many different ways. I know people have their opinions about him, but I just love him. And he mentioned like 15 things that he was like, I want to mention all these things because somebody's going to be struggling with one of them. And he mentioned like faith or marriage or something. And he went down the list. And one of them was finances. But then I was listening to it and I was thinking to myself, honestly, I'm not really struggling with any of those things, and that hopefully doesn't come across egotistical, but I was just like, man, I'm kind of doing really good at all those things he mentioned, and I don't think I'm struggling. I go, well, maybe finances I could always use more of, right? Very fleshly thing that I said. Nothing wrong, not saying God doesn't love finances by any means, and that's not what I'm saying, but I said, maybe finances could be better. Well, in that moment, it was really cool illustration that God showed me. He said, okay, well, if I give you more finances, you have to remove one of those other things that you said you're good at, all other 14 that you were good at. So I'm going to give you that, but what are you going to remove? And I was like, okay, well, joy. I'm like, I enjoy the joy. I'm not going to get rid of my finances. My marriage? No, I'm not trading finances for my marriage. My relationship with my kids? No, I'm not going to do that. My faith life? No, I'm not willing to trade that. I went down the list and I was like, I'd be willing to trade nothing for the finances, right? On that things because, and the only reason I share that story is because that was like a fleshly story of the world thing where I feel like I need more finances. Well, the same thing with the submission. It can be fleshly at times where we're like, I'm not letting my masculinity go down if I'm submitting to my wife. Well, it's just because it's not what we take it as in worldly terms. There's so much more of that. And it's just, no, I'm loving on my wife. And because of that, you actually get all the other things that you actually become more masculine. You actually become more, people look at you in a different way and say, man, your marriage is killing it. They just desire the one thing that most people don't have in this world. So in a weird way, you actually get more when you submit, you actually get more on the other side. So it's just one of those weird cycles but we got to be able to submit over here and allow God to bring the rest. That's just, again, bringing the submission is the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Let's let God do all the rest of those things. So there's nothing wrong with submitting at all.
It's really funny you bring that up, because, and this is a story I haven't really told anybody except for my wife. And I know specifically which video you're talking about with that story, because I listened to it the other night when I went out for a walk. It was Sunday night. I had some things going on in my life, and just not in a overly dramatic way, but sometimes I'll get stretched to capacity a bit with how many different things I'm involved in, and when people come to me as the problem solver, or sometimes when everyone's like, hey, I need you to fix X, Y, and Z, it becomes difficult when there's always this expectation that you're going to be the fixer, right? And when you have your own problems to fix, sometimes it's hard to in the moment see it's going to be okay, right? You get caught up in this, and no matter how much you exercise that, doubt's always going to creep in, right? There's always going to be this little seed of doubt that gets planted, and you got to keep working that muscle to get rid of it. So we had people over for my daughter's birthday, and I've been walking every day. September 1st, I started walking for a Mission 22 fundraiser, and I kept it going beyond that just because I enjoyed the daily practice and led to a few more things. And I made a commitment to do it regardless of weather, time, whatever it was. So it was like, maybe 10:30 at night, and it was pouring rain, and I had a crazy day, just a lot going on. I'm like, should I go for a walk? Like, I originally committed to doing September 1 through 30, and I was like, oh, well, that's done. The rest is really just on me. Maybe I'll skip it. I decided to go. And I left my house, and I was like, let me just open up YouTube, listen to something while I'm taking a walk. And that was the first video that popped up. And I looked at the thumbnail real quick, and I was like, I don't really know if this applies to where I'm at right now, and I don't know if this is the message I need to hear. But it was the first one that popped up. I was like, all right, I'm going to roll with it. Tap it. So I went for this walk, and as I'm going, I'm like, man, I really need a sign that things are moving in the right direction. I've taken a lot of leaps of faith lately, and it exposes me to a lot of risk. I'm like, I need some level of reassurance that all these things, these risks that I'm taking, are in the right path. So I go for this walk, and again, it's really late at night, pouring rain, I'm getting drenched, but I'm rolling with it, right? I get to a point in this, in his story about being faithful with the 5, right? We talked about this before. Being faithful with those 5 loaves. Not worrying about necessarily how it's going to happen, right? You add in the faith component to that 5 is going to cover it, right? Being faithful with the 5. And I have it right here on the sidewalk. It's a $5 bill laying just like that, right in the middle of the street. I'm like, all right, got it. Now I've walked that same path 34 times before that. I've never found $1. The minute he says faithful with 5,
you
$5 bill
$5
laying right there. So, I keep this on my desk at this point, just as a reminder that even in times that things feel like maybe they're not going to work out, or like you don't understand the path forward, like, be faithful with what you got.
Yeah.
Give it 100% of whatever you have, and just keep the trust. Like, just do the very best that you can. Give the best to your relationships. Give of yourself to the people on your team and your family, and just have faith in the fact that things are going to work out. There is a story written for you that is bigger than you could possibly believe, but you got to lean into it. You have to be willing to follow your calling. And no matter how weird you think your calling is, no matter how weird other people think your calling is, lean into it. And the sooner you do that, the faster you're going to get the things that you want in your life. Right? Yeah. And in some cases, you might find out that those things really weren't what you really wanted. And that's fine too. But I can't emphasize enough that having the faith to move forward through the difficulty, through the struggle, through the doubt, through the self-limiting beliefs, all that stuff, keep going. And find people in your life who are going to support you in that, and love with your heart and lead with your heart. And the people who are around you are going to support the crap out of you because they know that you do the same for them.
Yeah, that's so good, brother. Man, I love when God shows up like that. That was a phenomenal sermon that Stephen, he knocks them usually all out of the park, but they're always so timing, right, with those things. It's just, I coach my men's, I do like a group call for all my clients on Monday nights. And last night I was talking about just keep showing up. I had a crazy God story with somebody who's in Steve's mastermind with me. And last week, it is way too long of a story to share, but I'll just paraphrase it. Rick Nappy, it's turned into him talking too much on it. He reached out to me specifically last week on a Tuesday and said, we need to pray for so-and-so. He's going through it right now, big time. And he'd been going through it for a year. But if somebody, I already knew that. But when he reach out like extra, I know he's going through it. And honestly, dude, I had a long day that day, kind of like what you're saying. It's like going through it and I was so tired. I actually took a nap like right after I finished my last call. I fell asleep on the couch for like 15 minutes. And I never do it. And so my brain was dead. And so I said a prayer, and I'll give it a score of a 2 out of a 10. Like, I didn't feel like the spirit was moving. I didn't feel like all these words are just so powerful and all these other things, which sometimes obviously we feel those things. I just was like, man, I was like, okay, I said prayed. Well, got a message the next morning. So that was 5:50 at my time on Tuesday. So 8:50 East Coast time. I got a message from the other guy who was going through it, and he said everything for the past 16 months that he's been going through broke loose at 9 o'clock, and he was at his breaking wit's end, like done, broken, almost ready to throw in towel on life. And the gates of heavens opened up 10 minutes later after I said that prayer. I'm not saying because of me. It's Rick reaching out to me and just me bringing the 5 loaves. And like I said, so we just got to my point of saying that is we just got to show up, even if that's like we're tired. Like you're saying, it's raining, all this stuff. Like, I could have been in that moment like, dude, I just woke up. I'll pray for him later. Like when I get the spirit moving, like I don't feel it right now. It's because I was obedient. And I'm not saying that's like literally, please don't anybody take that because of me praying, but being obedient helped aid the gates of heaven to open up. You going on a walk, whether it's raining or whatever, had you not, well, then you don't turn on a podcast. Well, then you don't hear what you need to hear. Well, then it doesn't move the needle forward. So what do we got to do? Just keep showing up. Like literally, that's just the thing. It's just like, just keep showing up when it doesn't make sense. As Stephen was talking in that podcast or the sermon, God's math. God is always on time, right? Like in the way he shared that the 5 loaves and 2 fish fed 5,000, right? And had 12 baskets left over. But then when they did it again, they had 7 fish and only fed 4,000, and they only had a little bit left over. So he actually, with less, will do more. But we have to keep showing up. That's just the key. If not, we block our blessings. We block so many blessings. You wouldn't have got that 5. You wouldn't have got that story. And then we're frustrated the next day, and we're like, I don't know if things are moving forward, God. God's like, just keep showing up every day, and good things happen, right? So whether you're tired, you don't feel like it, raining, just keep showing up. That's just bringing the 5 loaves. You don't got to hit a home run every single time. Just get up to bat every single time.
Yeah. I think especially when you power that together with the strength of a good relationship, who's going to help cover the gaps when you have them, right? Yeah. Because look, inevitably, none of us are going to be perfect. We're all going to have days when we only have 40% to give. Like marriage is not this 50-50 thing. Partnerships are not 50-50. Some days they're 90-10. Some days they're 30-70. But like you need to invest in those relationships to call on them later. It's the same thing with faith, with relationships, with finances. Like if you don't invest in the bank, when you need it, it's not going to be there to pull out. Mm-hmm. So, I can't emphasize enough the importance of building those things and investing over time, even when it's not this Amazon Prime mentality where you don't get the instant result on your doorstep 2 hours later, where it's not that weight loss surgery that's going to give you the faster result. Maybe it's going to take you longer, but it's worth the wait. Like the wait is not punishment. It is preparation for the thing that you've asked for. So just keep showing up and keep serving, right? And understanding it's not guaranteed to happen super fast, right? No one said it was going to happen immediately. They just said it was going to happen. So just keep showing up until you've shown up enough times. Like, don't lose that faith. Yeah, it's so good.
So good, bro.
All right, I got 2 more questions for you.
Cool.
Number 1, if you've got one piece of advice to give to someone, tactical action they can take today to move their life forward, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh man, I mean, obviously give your life to Christ. And if you don't know that one, right, like that would obviously be the first one, but that's like more general of it, is to start seeing yourself as more than you actually are, right? Like understanding there is a purpose on your life, right, is so huge. But what we can do every single day is take those actions and just start being disciplined every single day. See yourself as this disciplined person and just putting those actions in place every single day, whatever that is for yourself. And that's going to look differently for every single person, what those actions are. But you just got to start with some type of action. As if not, we're going to be a dream. Like I watched a great talk on this last night, but we're going to be somebody who's like a daydreamer versus somebody who's actually a dreamer and goes and does something about it. A lot of us daydream and wish, but we got to go do something about it. So, I mean, we already covered that a lot earlier, is being absolutely disciplined and just going and doing those things, just starting with something. I'm going to give you one for your marriage, because this is one that I always tell, and I'll tell you what changes most of the marriages that we work with. And it's a simple one that you can do every single day. Spend 20 minutes every single day with your spouse, uninterrupted, no phones, no kids, no TV, no nothing, uninterrupted talking. And try to not talk about the kids or the bills or this, that, and the other. Just talk about other stuff. At first, it's gonna feel weird for certain people because a lot of people aren't that connected with their spouse. You keep doing that for 30 days, every single day, you're going to be down rabbit holes that you've never really done. You're going to learn things about each other that you didn't even know you learned about each other every single day. Do that and pair that with being extremely honest during that time and vulnerable. Don't hold back. If God puts something on your heart that I need to share this, share it without worrying about the judgment that we were talking about earlier. So if you pair that quality time with 100% honesty, you do those two things, your marriage will go to heights like never before. I promise you. And I could go that'd be a whole podcast going down the importance of both of those. I'll leave that out of there, but I promise you, you'll get to know each other. I talk to couples who've been together all the time, 15, 20 years. They really don't know each other. They really don't. And once you get to know each other, good things will happen. 20 minutes a day, non-negotiable. And everybody says, I'm too busy. You're not. Believe me. If Elon Musk can do all the things that he's doing, you can spend 20 minutes with your wife. And if you can't spend 20 minutes with your wife, then you don't really love your wife that much, because we got 20 minutes. Everybody has it. If we can say we're too busy, well, then work's too important. Our kids too important and all that if we can't spend 20 minutes. So do the 20 minutes every day, which then comes back to my first tip, just being disciplined. Do it every single day, non-negotiable, rain, sleet, snow, shine, anything. Always do it. It's not going to always feel like the most amazing conversation ever, but it will move the needle forward. And there will be times that conversation is so amazing and it will just grow you guys like never, ever before. It's literally just that simple if you just did it every day. That's how we fell in love in the first place, right?
Yeah. Man, the simple stuff is people want to look past the fundamentals. They want to look past the simple stuff. Everyone wants this like ninja level trick to do whatever, and they want it fast. But we gloss over the simple stuff and then getting the fundamentals right, like really nailing the fundamentals, cannot be stressed enough, and how much of a difference that'll make.
Yeah, truly.
Man, powerful stuff. All right, so last question, because man, this has been like drinking from a fire hose today. Favorite type of cake?
Favorite type of cake?
Yeah.
Oh man, I got to go with a cheesecake, man. I'm a cheesecake guy. If I'm gonna have any cake, that's what it would be.
All right. Toppings, strawberries, blueberries, just straight up.
Yeah, I like a good strawberry. Yeah, I got nothing wrong with that. What about you? What's your favorite type?
Good to know. My favorite type, like a little chocolate peanut butter. It's my go-to.
Okay. Ooh, peanut butter. Oh man, there we go.
Good to go. All right, well, I mean, we can't have a No Have Cakes podcast unless we talk about cake, so gotta make sure we get that covered.
Man, for sure. Great question.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for your time, your transparency, honesty, and just showing up here and being who you are and standing up and being an awesome example of just, man, I don't even have the word for it. Just being an amazing example of a human. And I love you. Yeah. I appreciate you. Thank you. If other people want to get more of you, where would they do that?
Yeah, thanks, man. I love you, bro. Thanks for being, I'm so glad God put you in my life. I'm so glad that, we were able to connect on here. So thank you for being the person that you are, the leader that you are, to be overcoming everything that you've been overcoming in your life and all that you've done, man. So that's an inspiration for me. So thank you for being who you are, first and foremost. And if the people want to get a hold of me, honestly, the best way I always say is just Tommy McAllister on Instagram. That's the best way. You can DM me in there. I will be the personal one who actually gets back to you. Or you can go to email me at highlevelhusband@gmail.com and get a hold of us. And whether you need coaching or you just want somebody to encourage you, reach out. And so those are the two best spots.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you again, sir.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you, bro.